Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Diana. I'm the Global Blockchain Business Council's Head of Research and Sustainability. And it's my pleasure today to welcome you to GBBC's, I'm going to say third of a series of roundtables after we launched GSMI 4.0. Today, we will focus on technical standards and the output of the working group. We will give a brief overview of the list of 63 bodies that we've identified advancing standards in blockchain technology. If you have more suggestions as the community, we always welcome them. Technical standards are important because they're common guidelines based upon agreed upon rules and definitions. Technical standards ensure functionality with interoperability for scale in the space. And technical standards may precede regulatory developments to ensure reliable, safe, and continued innovation, which is why I'm very excited today to be joined by Dan Conway, teaching professor and associate director of the Blockchain Center of Excellence at the University of Arkansas, and Neil Wasserman, adjunct professor in computer science at the George Washington University. And they will present the result of many months of working group collaborations. And then we'll have an open discussion with members of the community and the working group who are here now, and our supporters. The goal today is to define action items and topics in need of continued conversations and collaborations to advance technical standards in ways that will support responsible growth and innovation of blockchain technology. So without further ado, I'll take it to Dan Conway if you want to give a brief presentation.
All right. Sounds like I should do that. So I believe I'm sharing a PowerPoint slide. I'm probably not going to make it large or hit the play button on it because then things appear on screens that I can't quite figure out. So my name is Dan Conway. I've been involved in, excuse me, in blockchain for a very long time, well before Bitcoin had any value to it at all. So it's been a really interesting journey going through this, and being part of the U.S. standards body in blockchain has been a delightful professional and personal experience. It's those of you who have not participated in standards, it's a great way to expand your professional network, and I'm very grateful for the people I've met, amazing people domestically and around the world, and I've been fortunate to learn from pretty much every one of them. We're really a collection of people who have made mistakes over the last 30 or 40 years, and we want to learn from them and learn from other people. So I look at standards very much as sort of a risk management viewpoint. So this is from the ISO standards website. What do standards do for you? Well, to me, they provide a lot of wisdom that you don't have to learn the hard way. When things don't work as they should, it means that standards are absent. So I'm the process by which standards are built is very rigorous, and it's sometimes pretty slow. Those of us who are involved in it are often not compensated for it, but what comes out at the end is generally well thought out. And the nice thing about these international standards is that they have viewpoints from people around the world. So I'm in regular contact with my colleagues in Russia and Korea and Qatar and Dubai and Estonia and so on. Great things going on all around the world. We all are learning from each other, but trying to produce documents that have some inherent risk management associated with them. Because we're generally a group of people who's goofed up at things in the past. I went to the Montreal meeting, the international meeting this fall, and a lot of the funding for blockchain travel had been reallocated to AI. As my Russian colleague said, the smart people are working in the intersection space of AI and blockchain. So that's going to create new sort of standards opportunities and so on. But blockchain mentions is probably a healthy thing, that it's kind of coming down to the point that we don't have to say so many things about blockchain. It's become past the peak of the hype cycle anyway. The report that the team has put together um, really has these categories to them. I know it's probably hard to read these things, but you can get to the website and download. We were looking at such things as what these groups are focusing on. Are they regional or global? Are they regulatory? Are they associations, industry associations? Or are they formal standards bodies, which have a different structure to them and hierarchy to them, different goals and so on? We ended up with 63 on our final list, and of that list, 26 were the United States. Now, I think that's a little bit maybe misleading as far as where the efforts are going on. I hardly consider the US to be the leader in this space, despite the number of groups that get together. At international meetings, Jamaica had as many people there as the United States. China certainly had 10 times as many people. So I think the efforts going on around the world are probably more balanced, and certainly the innovations going on in places where there's less regulatory burden or indecision at the U.S. So while this looks like it's a U.S. centric technology, it's really not. And there's great things going on all around the world. And I can talk about those things another time. But types of organizations sort of split between standards and associations. Um, so domain specific things. Mostly global standards. People like to think of themselves as global. And for the outcomes, technically is where a lot of this stuff was originated. The purpose of things was technically oriented. Now, industry folks, which is good news, is kind of all over the place. This is intentionally unreadable, but we have all kinds of industry focus. Finance, supply chain are natural things to do in sort of international technology space. So there's derivatives of those, but there's a lot going on. There's nuclear nonproliferation, dual use chemical tracking. There's identity, which is a bit of a mess. I'm going to avoid that myself. I did want to mention as the standards grow to a peak, and we have people in the room here who are heads of U.S. standards bodies. We take these things to the ISO standards, and this is kind of where they're at. They have working groups now that are in foundations, which are just sort of definitions, smart contracts, and some of that is trying to change their vocabulary currently. It's getting some resistance. Governance, use cases, which is really interesting. It's the only domain I know of that has a use case that asks, why would you use blockchain for this use case? So that's kind of an interesting document. I use it all the time, the working group document, because it's got a fairly well enumerated description of what goes into a use case. Interoperability is, I'm intimate with that group, and they just got non-fungible tokens moving. uh, Advisory groups, things are just starting, include digital currencies, which everybody's a little bit interested in, especially how the central bank digital currencies are going to evolve. And that's something we should all care about. We should all have strong opinions one way or the other on those things. So I will participate in that and express those feelings. Um, but this gives you an idea of at least at the international level of fields. Now you're going to see a lot of joint things in the standards because blockchain is what we call combinatorial innovation. It's an assembly of existing technologies, most of them 70s, 80s, 90s. Anything from the NSA leak of SHA through Monero's ring signatures in 1999. So these things have been around a long time, which we already have sort of individual standards for. But now the assembly of these things, the combinations of these things, create new risks and new opportunities, of course. So what I wanted to, Neil's going to go a little bit more into some of these things, but I wanted to talk about the things real quickly in the next 5 minutes or 3 minutes or so of trends that are going on and that things that we talk about starting working groups or advisory groups within the international standards and so on. One is that this is a combinatorial technology. So applications within what the students are doing today is just assembling things. They're taking smart contract pieces from here and there and connecting them all and to create a new application. So it's in this combination and new forms of assembly that blockchain itself has created, and then the applications within blockchain. Digital twins is going to complicate this a little bit because now you're the digital twin consortium joined with IoT, and now you've got IoT digital twins, which are in a sense math models that can include precision, DNA, things like that, or Maxwell's equations or quantum sort of information, very complicated math models. If AI is involved in automated decision making, we have precision cognitive digital twins. So there's quite a bit going on in that space. But again, it's a new combinatorial trend that we see happening. Privacy, people don't want to run their own servers. 25 years ago, every university department had its own email server, and then they started to go to schools and then to the university, and now they're done software as a service. We should see the same trend where people still want privacy, but they want to use public infrastructure. People don't want to run their own servers. We've seen this going back to Novell Network in the 90s and infrastructure as a service and these other things. My home router is managed by Linksys and Cisco systems because I don't want to run my own server either. So I think we're going to see more trends that are going to be people who want privacy and frankly, some of the Hyperledger applications are probably going to move into privacy over public blockchains. So we're seeing more trends in that. Zero knowledge is just least privilege. It doesn't really make sense to build systems that give away more information than you need to. So we'll see that, and we already see that in blockchain, baseline protocol, and other things. But that will probably be a trend that we see in all software development. Zero knowledge rollups, Bitcoin Lightning, things like that are going to give some form of roughly a quasi privacy, but using the same cryptography as Bitcoin itself. So layer two stuff to help scale layer one, we're going to have to come up with standards of doing that. Polygon and again, using Nightfall within Polygon, rolling it up perhaps into a different blockchain through swap spaces. My colleagues in Russia are doing all kinds of machine readable stuff, as are in Jamaica. Machine readable means everything going on your blockchain is going to be instructions for a computer. So this is how we are thinking AI is going to integrate with blockchain. We will need to have lots of conversations about putting readable code on a blockchain. Lots of us who have been in this world for a long time don't think we're very good programmers, and we don't like the idea of immutable code going on a blockchain because we'd like to change it because context change and something that was secure is no longer secure. But other things you may want. Certainly, if you're running a drone swarm, you would want your code that says "Don't run into my neighbor drone" to be immutable. If you're doing AI, and NIST has a nice document, just came out in January on adversarial machine learning. So you don't necessarily want pieces of your machine learning, your AI, to be able to have an adversary make changes to it. So there's lots of applications where immutability of code could be a very favorable thing, even though I myself may not like my code. There are probably people that do it better. A couple more trends. Bank of America, 12 billion on information security. JP Morgan has 65,000 people who do information security within the organization globally. Bitcoin has zero. They have zero DBAs. They have zero public relations. They have zero legal team. They've been been killed by almost everybody who is an incumbent in the financial payments world, including insurance and so on. They have nothing to fight back with, and yet they have 0 people to do this versus 12 billion. So economics would suggest that a blockchain is a secure solution, that our typical approach of building something and then layering on security is just not working. Whereas opposed to starting with something that's secure and then giving it something to do does seem to be a pattern. So I think we're going to see kind of more of that, just because in the long run, economists win. They may be annoying and so on in the short run, but in the long run, they do win. A couple others, well, one other, identity. Again, I'll let others discuss this. I tend to believe identity should be a verb rather than a noun. Nouns can be stolen. Verbs, as in challenge response, zero knowledge systems, it's harder to steal verbs. But again, I'm kind of mixed on identity itself, and I'll let some of the smarter people kind of think through that. Finally, what we're trying to figure out, Neil and I and the rest of the group here, is how do we measure success? What does success look like with a standard? So I'm going to turn over the control to Neil and let him take over from here.
That was great, Dan. And you marked some questions that I'll say, audience, keep them in mind and we'll discuss them at the end. But Neil, go on and present your thoughts.
Very good. Let me share my screen. So I want to thank everyone for the support in this enterprise in the past, and especially people like Iman, who have contributed very well thought out papers, and we hope to encourage more participation in the future, because this is a collaborative effort that cannot be done by individuals. It requires a team focus. I'd like to just follow on from what Dan had presented and talk about the general trend toward the utility of standards in relation to application development and deployment, because I think one of the issues that any standards initiative confronts is the relative ease of creating the standards, but the relative difficulty of applying and using the standards. And we, of course, want to focus our efforts on standards that make a difference. So I'd like to say a few words about why we have standards and trends that relate standards to application development. There we go. So the standards have a long history, starting from currency that was standardized with seashells and hard currency, literally hard currency, that was enforced by punishments, such as if the British coinage agent had put a little bit too much lead in the silver coin, they would have their hand chopped off, and that was a way of enforcing standards. We hope to not have to go to such extreme measures in the standards that we produce, but in each of these fields, standards have been implemented because it's much cheaper to operate, say, a railroad that has standardized tracking than randomly sized tracking. And in communications, the same kind of evolution has occurred because of the utility of standards to reduce the design choices, basically, that are available to implementers of systems, and systems that can work together generally are more effective than systems that have to deal with difficult to overcome interfaces. So we've seen these standards evolutions in many different fields, and we're, of course, addressing blockchain. I like to think of standards in relation to an architecture, and this is a way of identifying where standards apply and dividing up the labor so that there are standards that apply to infrastructure, communications platforms, cloud storage, and there are standards that apply to blockchain operating systems, as we've been well aware of. And we're evolving to standards that have addressed the interfaces among platforms and eventually standards that address the applications that depend upon these platforms. In all of this, we require a governance structure that oversees the implementation of standards, that is, standards that don't have a penalty for not obeying them, like running red lights is a danger to the community. And so we have ways of enforcing compliance with traffic rules. And in parallel with all of these architectural levels are strategies that identify the metrics that are associated with those, incentives that are associated with the different layers of the architecture. And the standards apply to all of these layers of our operating systems, broadly conceived. And I won't dwell on this, but when we're teaching blockchain, we like to allow students, for example, to focus on particular layers of the architecture to see where they can fit. And why do we have standards? From my point of view, it relates to entropy reduction. That is, reducing the states that are available to the system, reduces the costs that are associated with developing, operating, and governing the system. And blockchain is a well-known mechanism for entropy reduction. Consensus processes provide ways of reducing the states that are available to the global system by providing this uniform view of what is valid data and valid transactions. And we're seeing the deployment of AI-based tools that also address these entropy issues. That is, the process of using artificial intelligence as a way of transforming the sea of data that we confront in our global data universe into nuggets of data that are actually useful for human purposes. And we apply standards and governance, again, to reduce the entropy of the system, to reduce the available choices that are acceptable to designers and users of systems. And finally, network effects propagate these behaviors across the network and create uniformity in the way that the system operates and allows us to understand at a human level the choices that are available to governing these systems. I've produced a couple of new charts that I hope may be useful. I won't go into detail, but the idea is to look at the application domains in terms of the standards that are relevant to these application domains. And so if we go through the matrix, the Excel matrix that was published as the main product of the Global Standards Mapping Initiative, I've translated that table into an application-oriented focus. And as we think of what standards are relevant to our work in terms of distributed finance, logistics, intellectual property, climate sustainability, healthcare, there are natural groupings of these standards that address what is relevant and how we can simplify the design choices that address the applications that then emerge from these application domains in DeFi, decentralized lending, and payments for vulnerable populations, and then associated values that are related to these application domains. And I won't go into detail on this, but we'll make this presentation and these charts available, and if it inspires some next level thinking related to the value of standards in relation to the application domains, I think that will be a productive direction to move in. And this is just a second chart that addresses the infrastructure domains. Interoperability standards are key to enabling interoperability, not only in the blockchain world, but in the data universe. And blockchain, as I've written about in other places, can play an important role in facilitating interoperability in such domains as healthcare and supply chain management. The standards also apply to blockchain platforms, as we well know, and one of the values of blockchain, as Dan had highlighted, is the ease with which the puzzle pieces are put together in a way that can be globally deployed in a effective, secure, and accessible way. Finally, regulation, coordination, standards integration, I regard it as its own application domain, because there needs to be activity that integrates these standards with respect to the needs of the larger community. And ultimately, what this results in is reduced design choice and deployment cost, trustworthy compliance processes, and user confidence in application services. So I think this is a little bit of a new direction that I hope some of you may pursue further. One of the topics in terms of trends is the impact of AI on blockchain. And I think if we think in more detail about it, that AI can address identity, interoperability issues, optimized token economics, a number of different areas. And I think this is, again, a new area that we need to address in terms of standards. What is the interface between AI and blockchain, and what kind of standards can be used to facilitate that? And how can AI, in fact, be helpful in implementing standards? And reciprocally, blockchain impact on AI can have a role in monitoring enforcement of standards, validation of training and output data, IP protection. I mean, a number of areas that blockchain can have on AI itself. So these two domains are becoming more and more integrated. And this chart highlights where blockchain can play a role in addressing the really challenging problem of validating the data that goes into AI applications and assessing the outputs of AI applications. One of the risks that we have in AI is the lack of confidence in the validity of the output. That is, if we put biased data into an AI model, a generative AI system will produce biased outputs. And how do we address the ethical and other issues that come out of the lack of trust and reliability in those systems? So I think a lot of new thinking has to be done in terms of where blockchain can impact these very important issues. Finally, I'd just like to focus our attention on the value of what we're doing as a group, and that the success of standards and of blockchain more generally can have important impacts on the capabilities that are available to underserved populations in terms of payments, asset capitalization, identity. I have a couple of projects going on disaster risk management in terms of the technology impact of disaster risk management processes. And I can discuss those offline with any of you who have an interest in that. There's a new project on food security. How can blockchain impact supply chains that address food security and water availability, for example, predictive models that address these issues. Healthcare progress and access. Blockchain can facilitate access to services, interoperability of data, protection of patient privacy, all kinds of issues. And trustworthy information, as I mentioned in the AI discussion, is becoming more and more difficult to produce. And how can blockchain standards address the issues of what information can we rely on, just not only in politics, but in healthcare, in managing the proliferation of devices that impact our lives. And finally, identity as a human right is emerging as an important issue. And one example is the use of that in preventing human trafficking, which is a worldwide business, unfortunately. And maybe blockchain can have a role in addressing that issue, as our offline discussion previously had highlighted.
Yes.
So with that, I will turn the discussion over to all the very smart people on this call and invite your contributions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dan and Neil, for sharing these main insights about technical standards, their importance. We don't think about technical standards on a daily basis generally, but they're important in order for things to work, right? And also the reasoning behind our GSMI mapping. This was great. Thank you also. I would say once again, we've said it many times, thank you for your valuable work as co-chairs of the GSMI Technical Standards Working Group, and to all of the working group members, supporters, and feedback providers for their contributions. We are now going to end the recording and start an open discussion with the participants in the room.